What's up, everybody? Um, that's right. If you do not know me, my name is Tom, and I'm in the Navy tribe. Yeah, we can give it up for the Navy tribe. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today and kicking off this brand new series about Moses. We're going to learn so much about him and how great of a leader he was. But speaking of leaders, I want to start tonight with some of the leaders that we already know. Some in history. We can start with one like Martin Luther King Jr. The impact he made for the African American community was beyond measure, and I think we all learned much about him. Or we could say someone in more recent topic. We have a man named Charlie Kirk, which I think we all looked as a role model for how well he did with knowing the Bible and how well he spoke. And then there's some others that I actually chat GPT'd, some fictional ones, because I wanted to see who the best were. And so the first one they gave me was Optimus Prime from Transformers. I'm not a big Transformers fan, but you know he's pretty cool, I guess. The second one was Captain America. You know, Avengers Endgame was a great movie. I think that one's valid. But the third one was it's actually part of a TV show called Ted Lasso. And Coach Ted Lasso, they said, was the third greatest leader. And he was a great soccer coach. But the thing that they all have in common with these leaders is that they step into something bigger than themselves. But one thing that some people might not know about these certain leaders is that they constantly doubt themselves all the time. Because, I think we all had those moments where we're given a big responsibility or put in charge of something, and we're like, me? You want me to do that? And so I come here today because we've all felt like we've been way in over our heads. And at one time for me where that's happened was actually last weekend, 2 years ago. I preached my first ever sermon here at Wellspring when I was a freshman. And looking back on that now, I was sitting back there. You can ask Mr. Eric. I was shaking so hard. I was like, I'm not going out there. I don't even know what I'm going to say. I'm going to freeze up, and I'm going to walk off the stage. And if you told me that 2 years later I would be doing my fourth sermon, I would have told you that you were crazy. But I'm here today, and I'm so, so grateful for all of you around me that have been able to take this chance. And so, we've all been there. When we put in that situation where we're asking ourselves, what if I'm not enough to lead? And that question today is where we're going to really root ourselves, because that's a question I know we all struggle with. And if you have that question, then so did one of the greatest leaders in all of history, a man named Moses. If you couldn't tell, we're going to be talking about him a lot. And for the rest of the series, we're going to be talking about what he did and how we can learn from everything that he did. But like I said, what's true for a lot of us is even if we don't say it, we want our lives to matter. We want to do something that we're remembered by, or we want to do something that we're remembered for. But what we don't always say is that we constantly doubt ourselves or live in our limitations. But that's when a little voice kicks into our head and says, I'm not sure I believe in you right now. Or I'm not sure you can do that. And I'm up here today to tell you that that voice is not from our God. That voice is from the enemy. Devil, Satan, whatever you want to call him, he is very much real in this world. And you see, his one goal is to separate us from our Father and all of the great plans he has for us. And so with that all said, I have a question. What would you do if it was only up to you? Or other words, what would you do if it was all up to you? Whenever we hear that question, we straight think to our limitations. We think, well, I'm not confident enough to lead a group, or I'm not brave enough to go back to that place where I ran from. Or why would God want to use someone like me? But what if that's because we weren't meant to think like that at all? Because the more we think like that, the smaller we feel. And it makes us think like we're not made for anything in this world at all. But what if it's not supposed to be all on us? What if God never intended us to carry that weight? So what do you do when you feel called to something bigger, but you feel way too small? When you want to trust God with your story, but you're not sure that you even trust yourself? Well, if you've been in this spot, then no worries, because Moses was in the exact same spot. And you see, the thing about Moses was that he was just as broken as he can get. And we're going to learn about him in just a second. But before we learn about him, I want you to know that we're not just going to learn about him, but we're going to learn about how God changed him. And maybe you'll get a new view on not who God is, but how that God hasn't given up on you yet. And so, we're going to start today by giving a quick backstory on who Moses was, right? Not many of us know who Moses was, but Moses was born as a Hebrew, and he grew up in Pharaoh's palace, right? Doesn't sound like too bad of a life living in Pharaoh's palace. He was doing pretty well. But one thing led to another, and Moses ended up killing an Egyptian man. After he did this, he fled from Egypt and settled down in a quiet area for around 40 years and served as a shepherd, where he tended sheep in a quiet life. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Tom, you want me to spend the next couple weeks learning about a man who killed someone and then ran from a country. I want you to stick with me here, because God has a tendency to use these exact people for such great stories that we all know. And so, as Moses is having his quiet life, where he's like, that Egypt part, that failure part, yeah, that part's over. That's exactly when God shows up, through a burning bush. Now, many of you may know the story of the burning bush, but if you don't, this is one of the most coolest entrances I think God could have had to reveal himself to Moses. Because before even he said a word, before he said one word, Moses revealed himself through a bush that was on fire, but it wasn't crumbling. Now, if you're anything like Moses, I would probably be freaking out. I'd be like, this bush is talking to me and it's on fire and I don't like it. But Moses listened anyway. And so check out what God says here. He says, and then God speaks, I have seen the misery of my people, so now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Whoa. We know that Moses, the same guy who killed a man from Egypt and ran, God, you're asking me to go back to that place and save your people? No, you got to be crazy. But God wasn't crazy. God knew what he was doing when he was picking Moses for this task. You see, God often shows up in unexpected ways into unexpected people. You see, right when Moses heard that, he was like, me? Who am I to do this? Why would God choose me? But like when I said, when God shows up in unexpected ways, he shows up through people, through our hobbies, or through our fears. He shows up to us when we need him most. And so if we're saying that God can't speak through a burning bush, we're limiting our Creator. And when we limit our Creator, we limit his power over us. So who are we to say that God isn't trying to speak to us right now, but we're just choosing not to listen? Right? But then God, look what God says next. He says, I will be with you. Now, when I listen to this piece of scripture, I just think of a nice warm blanket that's wrapped around me, and I feel like I can run through a brick wall with this, knowing that God's with me. But you see, Moses still kept pushing back, no matter what God said. He said, what if they don't listen to me? Like, why would they believe what I'm saying? Why would they come with me? Like, I'm just a failure. What am I doing? I'm not good enough for you, God. And then God says this, the most powerful piece of scripture I think I've seen in a while. He says, I am who I am. I am who I am. The translation for this is I'm everything. I'm the beginning, I'm the end, and I'm everything in the middle. I don't need help. I don't need a backup plan, and I don't need a plan B. Everything that you search for, everything that you long for in life is found in me. I'm the whole thing. And so when you come to God and you say, God, I'm not enough. I don't feel like I'm enough. God says, you don't have to be enough because I already am. You don't have to be enough when God already is. When you come to God and you say, God, I'm not strong enough or tall enough or fast enough to make an impact on the court. I'm pretty sure God responded in Philippians 4:13, where he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Or when you come to God, you say, God, nobody will listen to me. Nobody wants to be my friend. I don't know what to say. I'm pretty sure God says that I'll speak through you and I will bring the people to you, just like I'm the good shepherd. And when you come to God, you say, God, what am I doing here? I don't feel like I should be here right now. And God already responded to this question. When over 2,000 years ago, he sent his one and only son, Jesus, to live a perfect, sinless life, 33 years on this earth, and then he gave his son willingly up on the cross for our lives. So when you come to him and you say, I don't feel like I'm worth anything, he says that you're worth everything. So then I ask another question. What is your people won't listen to me situation? Whether it's you feel like you don't have the right words, or why would anybody listen to me? You know what I've done in my past? Why would anybody listen to me now? There's no point. Or whether you think that you're too far gone. Where do you feel like you're not enough? Or that you don't measure up? You see, those things that you're thinking right now are the exact lies Moses believed about himself when God asked him. But you see, the thing with Moses was he kept pushing back. And he kept pushing back. But you see, God is huge and he is big. But you see, the thing about God is that your weaknesses don't stop God's power when you feel like you're not enough. And your excuses and your limits will never cancel his call. Because he's calling for all of us. And no matter how far or how hard you run from it, he will always call for you. And this is when God says something very interesting. He says, let's check out what he says here. He says, who gave human beings their mouths? Who gave human beings their mouths? Newsflash, God gave you your mouth. And so he's telling us here, he says, I gave you your mouth. I know how it works. And I gave each and every person such a unique and specific voice so I could recognize when you call out for me. Right? Because God shows to Moses that he's been faithful to everyone. He mentions people like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. He mentions all of these people. And he explains to him, like he's asked him to check my resume. He says, if you don't think I can turn your story around, you're crazy. Look at all these people that I've changed for the good, and you can be one of them. You see, at the beginning of chapter 4, he talks about Moses' staff. It's just a plain old shepherd's staff. What good could that do? But then God used that staff for countless miracles. Countless miracles God used Moses' staff. And you think you don't have something that God can use. You see, that's the thing God does with us today. He says, I'm going to use your life, your talents and uniqueness that I gave you. And I want to use it for the better, for the world, to show the world what I'm like. All Moses had was a staff. So I ask you today, what do you have? Moses with his staff was nothing powerful, but when Moses gave his staff to God, it was used for miracles across the world. And so I ask you, what do you have today that when you give to God can change everything? whether it's your story, your friendships, whatever it is. Because God doesn't need perfect. He doesn't say to you, I need you to read the entire Bible and then you can have a conversation with me. He doesn't ask that of us because he doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to be willing to take that step and trust him. And so as we kick off this Moses series tonight, I have just with you one question that I want to leave you with. Just one simple question. Now, I don't want you to do anything, but I want you to sit with this question. I don't want you to blow over this question because when I heard this question, it changed my mindset forever. Here's the question. What would you do if you were absolutely certain God was with you? What would you do? Not just a little bit certain, not just hopefully, but absolutely certain the God of the universe was with you at all times. What would you step into? What would you stop running from? Where would you finally be able to live in peace? Because he is with you all the time, because he has so much power. And if you don't think he's with you, I want you to remember this, that God is big. Our God is so big. When Moses said, who am I to do this? God flipped the question on him. When Moses said, they're not going to listen to me, why should I even try? God flipped the question on him and said, will you listen? He says, Moses, you're so worried on what other people are going to think about what you're going to say. But I'm asking, will you trust me anyway? Because that's God all asks, is for us to trust him, to listen, and to go. You see, like I said earlier, God has already placed something in your hands. Moses had a staff, and in God's hands, it was used for countless miracles. And so I come to ask you today, what do you have in your hands that when I'm up here begging you to just give it to God and so it could be used for the good? Your voice, your story, your friendships, whatever it is, I'm up here begging you just to give it to God, no matter where you are. Because like I said, he doesn't need perfect. He just needs willing. And he's ready to work with you wherever you're at. And so I want you guys to always remember, you don't have to be enough when God already is. And I want us to really rest in this as we go on through our week, as we go on through tomorrow and the next day. I don't want you to forget about this, and I want you to keep wrestling with that question, and so we can build our faith upon it. So let me pray. Hey, Jesus, thank you so much for today and for this amazing opportunity to speak with all my friends here, Lord.